conservation initiatives in the Colorado River Delta. Wow, that's pretty important. Raised in a rural Mexican town, she holds degrees from UC Berkeley and the University of Arizona. She is a doctor, right?
I wish.
Oh.
No, I only have a master's.
Okay,
One day.
okay. Fatima also serves as a board member for the High Country News and is an advocate for racial and climate justice. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Irene, Stacy, for these invitation and also for coordinating, bringing everybody together. But most importantly, for pioneering this work of extreme heat. Irene mentioned that they have been organizing this workshop for 15 years. And so they are really like the pioneers of this work. And so we're very happy that, we have somewhere to look. So thank you so much for that. And so I was asked today just to share what the city of Tucson has done this summer for building heat resilience. And so it all starts here. So this year we focus on creating and implementing the city of Tucson's first ever heat action roadmap. And I just want to mention that this is an action item within the Tucson Resilient Together plan. And so it's the next step of implementing our larger climate action goals and strategies. So there's continuity there. And of course, there's a QR code. You can find it online if you want to see it. It's in both English and Spanish. So thank you so much for some of our interns also at the U of A that help us translate the roadmap into Spanish. And I also want to thank everybody that participated in creating the roadmap. Karina Martinez, who's here in the audience, Lab, and many of you really provided very insightful input. So thank you so much. Very high level, I will not go into detail of how this roadmap was created. I do want to mention that the research of what other cities were doing in terms of their heat strategies started last year. But it was really this year, early this year in February. I don't know if any of you were here for the Southern Arizona Heat Climate Summit. Like, so you were there, right? So your input in that summit created the actions and strategies of the roadmap. So we had, just to provide you a very high level, we had the summit in February. We had 4 months. During that 4 months, we had a very short but effective community input process where we gather additional input, basically taking it back to, did we get this right? And then in June, mayor and council, we presented this heat action roadmap to mayor and council, and so they adopted it. So that was 4 months. So that was record time, impressive work done by all of you. We couldn't have done it with your participation in the summit, with your ongoing feedback on the heat action roadmap. So thank you so much. Now the city has a strategy, a comprehensive strategy to address extreme heat. So what that strategy consists of is we have 3 goals, 10 strategies, and 61 actions. And I will not go into detail, but very generally, goal number 1 focuses on preparing, informing people. So at that individual level, what can we do to help people prepare and be ready for extreme heat? So that preparedness piece so that we can protect each other. The second goal looks at our homes and our community centers. So how can we support having a healthy home so that we're safe in our homes, right? But also for those people for community members that don't have access to a house, how can we make our cooling centers or cooling centers safe spaces that can be accessed by everyone, right? So we did a lot of learning this summer. And so the third goal looks at the more like the built environment at the neighborhood level, right? So at the individual in our home, but also as a community, what are the pieces that we need to put in place so that our neighborhoods are safe, so that we have shade, so that we have shaded bus stops, right? And so the heat action roadmap looks at three goals. And that is the, the push, like looking individually, at the home, individual and community level. So today we're focusing on the things that we did advance this summer. The first thing that I want to mention is that when we were developing the heat action roadmap, we had a parallel process of drafting a heat protection ordinance for city contractors and similar provisions for city employees. That is what is within the city of Tucson jurisdiction. So we have these parallel processes. So when mayor and council adopted the roadmap, they also adopted a heat protection ordinance for city contractors. So we wanted to take them the strategy, but also in action. And also they gave us the direction to start the process internally also with our administrative directive, which I'm happy to share that both are now in place. They're being implemented. Contractors are required to have and implement heat safety plans. And the same thing with our city departments. Every city department now has a heat safety plan that is being implemented. This year, we're gonna go through a process of evaluating how that's going, looking at compliance, and potentially come to mayor and council next year with recommendations for improvement. Also know that OSHA has an existing, they're collecting comments on their on the federal ruling. So if that is adopted, then we need to reflect ours or ordinance with what they're proposing. And so this summer, we also joined Pima County Health Department's heat action or joint heat action team, or JHAT. I would say, and then Julie can share more on this, but I would say that for me, this was the summer that we had the most multi-jurisdictional coordination. Pima County led the way with these, recurring meetings where we coordinated. We also talk about like strategy. And the county created these Beat the Heat campaign that provided resources for all of the partners, consistent messaging. This is just an example of what they did on like the messaging that they put out in some of the city buses. Similar flyers were distributed inside the buses and also in cooling centers and or heat relief kits. So another thing that as part of the multi-jurisdictional coordination efforts, we work with the Red Cross and we distribute heat relief kits and mobile home parks. I have to say that for me, this was a very, very important strategy. It's important to be like high level strategic thinking, but it's equally important to be on the ground, to listen to the community. So we went door to door on some mobile home parks, asking community members, checking on them, how are you doing in this summer? Here are some resources. We gave them the cooling bags. And I always share this story because it was very impactful to me. And I just want to share it with you. I knock on the door and that person didn't open the door. I did notice a strong smell. I moved to the next door. The neighbor on the next door was like that, not the person, the mobile home that you just knocked on, like that person passed away in July during the power outage. For me, it was very, very intense. And it was a strong reminder of, we were doing so much efforts on the ground with this multi-jurisdictional coordination, but it still wasn't enough. And so there's a lot of learning to take from that. We need to start earlier. But anyways, I do want to share this with you because these actions do save lives. And then the other thing that we did this summer was, we put out a call for a heat advisory committee. Thelma is here, she's part of the advisory committee as well as other community members. And so these advisory committees is going to help us guide the implementation of the heat action roadmap. Some of the suggestions that we get from the community is like, you need community as you're implementing your strategies, and this is one way to do that. For the second goal, we as a city, we have allocated $900,000 for the solar empowerment program, which is going to, sorry, I don't know how to, yeah. There you go. For the solar empowerment program, which is helping or supporting the installation of solar panels in low-income homes. And so we are doing this with partners, Technicians for Sustainability and SERI, but the city is also currently in a process of working with the consultant to establish a city-operated solar empowerment program to increase capacity in the region for solar installation and hopefully, not hopefully, and go after the Solar for All Arizona funding, so bring it here to Tucson with that increased capacity. As part of these multi-jurisdictional coordination efforts, we went from having, I believe, 13 cooling centers in 2023 to now like more than 40. This summer, more than 40, and this was really like, you know, a testament of what comes out of working together as a community, that collective effort, bringing collective action, right? City of Tucson's Housing First program also offer mobile, the mobile showers throughout the summer. We are also, as part of the next steps, we launch the FEMA Resilient Hub grant. And so I'm very excited about that grant because as one of the first steps that we're gonna do is going to allow us to assess the cooling centers and assess their readiness for becoming resilient hubs, right? And so part of the work that we did this summer is like, you know, it fire up some cooling centers. And so we now want to know, like, you know, the usability, how accessible they are, what are some of the pieces that they have in place to become resilient hubs. They have solar panels in case of a power outage, right? Because we're still dependent on the grid, right? So what are some of those spaces that can serve as resilient hubs? You know, they can be ready to be used during a power outage, right? So we're doing that assessment of the existing cooling centers readiness. And then also as part of this grant, I think this is my favorite part, we are gonna be building a community leadership academy. Yeah, community leadership academy, something like that. Well, during this academy, we are going to develop modules. Learning modules. So like the first module would be, you know, high level, what is climate change? We're also going to walk participants from my communities through a process of what are your vulnerabilities and risk in your neighborhood? What are the high level vulnerabilities and risk in Tucson? What are those in your neighborhood? And walk them through the process. So at the end, those neighborhoods will have all the tools that they need to have a preparedness plan. And that preparedness plan, through that process, they're also going to identify those risks and vulnerabilities, right? The coolest part about this grant is that it does have some funding for implementation. So we are going to be funding, you know, some of the projects that come out of that. Our community really needs this to be a resilient neighborhood. We have some funding to support some of those projects, and we recently secured a little bit more funding for implementation for this particular project. So we're very excited. It's going to be a pilot project. If this works well, we can have that curriculum on our website that every neighborhood can use. And then we can find other resources to potentially fund implementation of those. But this is a pilot project. We're very excited. The other thing that we did this summer is we distributed heat relief kits. I do want to give a shout out to Thelma and her team because we learned so much from them. You're going to hear from them, but they do these. This is part of the work that they do daily, right? For us, we focus on heat relief. So we assemble and distributed over 900 kits this summer, mainly to the house, but also to some of the residents living in mobile home parks, as I mentioned earlier. And one of the things that we learned from these efforts that people want to help. People want to care and they want to volunteer. So we had over 100 unique volunteers with like the double volunteer hours. So that was very exciting. We distribute these kits in 19 different locations across the city. And it was a very successful, if I can share some stories with you, there was times that, part of the supplies that the kid had was sandals or flip-flops. And so there was times that like people didn't have flip-flops and they put them on right away. There was times that their flip-flops were tear apart, so they changed them. There was times that we had to use a reusable water bottle and the liquid IV with that ice cold water that we had with us to help people that was very evident that they needed the help. And so we learned a lot from this process. We're very thankful for the partnership with the MDOT, or like the multidisciplinary outreach team for the city of Tucson and Housing First Department for all the lessons learned and all the guiding through this process. It was wonderful. And thanks to the so many volunteers that participated, we were able to ask for questions of kit recipients. Not everybody participated in the survey, so we had about 400. But some of the things that we learned is that most of the folks are males. They're people of color, so Hispanic, Black or African American, and Native make the largest. If you combine them, like they're the largest population, and they're between 25 and 44. So we saw a lot of young people in certain areas, which I have children. My daughter's like 13-year-old, and I seen people or young folks that are only a couple years older was it was hard. We another story, if I can share, there was a mom in one of the washes that was just sitting there, and she asked, "Hey, what are you guys doing? We're distributing these kits, kid relief kits." And she's like, "Well, I'm just here. My daughter is in the wash. She doesn't want to come home, and I'm just here checking on her." So those are very, like, that could be any of us. So it's very humanizing to do this work, and it also highlights, the importance of being on the ground. And then my biggest surprise, because I don't typically work in this space, was that, most of the people that took the survey had been living here in Tucson for more than 20 years. And so that to me that's a surprise. But again, I don't typically work in this space, but I thought it was a interesting point. And then lastly, I think this is my last slide. So for the neighborhood, right, like cleaner neighborhoods, that goal 3. So the city of Tucson continues to increase green infrastructure by planting trees as part of Mayor Romero's Tucson Million Trees Initiative, but also the Storm to Shade program. So she is here. They do amazing work across the city, increasing our green infrastructure. The city also continues to have fare-free transit, which this summer serve as mobile cooling units. And allow people to move from one place to another. I know that the U of A had done a research on the connectivity of the bus lanes and the cooling centers, and like I can't remember the exact percentage, but I think it's 90% or a little bit more of those routes are directly connected to cooling centers. And so that's great. There was only like some that you needed to transfer. So that connectivity is important. The fact that fare-free, that public transit is free, it's also accessible for everyone. The city of Tucson is also transitioning our fleets to electric. We went from having 3, I believe, light duty vehicles and a couple years ago to now having over 50. Or Suntran buses, we have 10 electric buses on the road and 10 more are coming. And so I mentioned these because the transportation sector is one of the main contributors of heat trapping emissions. And so if, this is a whole hands-on deck approach. So looking at our built environment, looking at individually, collectively, what are the things that we can do to reduce heat in our city. The transportation system plays a role on that. As part of that, happy that this summer, the Department of Transportation and Mobility and SunTrans received an $11.38 million from the Federal Transit Administration. That funding is going to, excuse me, help upgrade some aging equipment, but it's also going to provide and bring shade to bus stops. So it is important to have fare-free transit, but it's also important to have spaces where people can wait for their buses and be safe from the heat. We are working, the climate action team is working with the Department of Transportation and Mobility in designing some of these bus stops as a pilot project. So they're gonna be ready to go because we have some designs that include rainwater harvesting collection, that include other pieces of safety. And so it's very exciting work, and we hope to begin construction in some of these projects soon. I think that is my last workshop, or my last slide. Don't know if we do questions now or at the end.
Yeah, there's plenty of time. So even if you wanted, go ahead.
Fatima, I was curious, you showed the map of cooling centers, and I was just noticing that the map on the Climate Action Hub doesn't show nearly as many cooling centers, so is the Action Hub gonna be updated to show this map, or where is this, why is this map different?
Yeah, so this map was created, and I don't know if, which I should have brought, like the Pima County Health Department created this very amazing foldable, then I have to share with you. Flyers that includes the maps, well, I know that there was a time where we were asking partners, and you can talk a little bit more about this, to register their cooling centers in the site so they could be reflected on the map. And so there might be some discrepancy of like, what got printed versus what was put in the website when we had the available information. I would have to say that next year we're likely going to do this exercise, and so we're hoping that we'll have, similar response. Some of these cooling centers are city owned and operated, some of them are county, city owned and operated, and some of them are community groups. And so it really takes everyone. And so yeah, if there's some discrepancies, probably around like the time when the data was available. Yeah.
So I'm looking at this map, and so we live in Maryland Central near Swanton Speedway, and we have a whole lot of homeless people living around there, and there is no cooling centers in that area. I think I talked to you before about like having one emergency cooling center at the school across from Pinecrest Park. So that like if the grid went down, then neighbors could get there and be in a cool place. But I want to first thank you. I do ride the public transportation, and the showers make a huge difference because I do wear this mask, but I haven't noticed. Used to be like one homeless person got on there and your eyes are watering and they don't smell anymore. So that's I know you're embarrassed about that, but it's a fact, of when you're riding the bus. So I appreciate the showers that you're giving the people.
First program.
Huh?
That's the House of First program.
Thank you. But I sent you an email the other day. I ride the bus, so I sit at the bus stops, and they're not, even the ones with the shade things are not shading the seat. So people are like the homeless might put the loose bus and put it behind it to get to the shade. So if you're making the plans for the new shading things, depending also on what way the bus is like facing, where you put the shade, because otherwise the people if you want to sit in the shade while you're waiting for the bus, sometimes a half an hour, sometimes an hour, then it needs to be where the shade actually falls.
Yeah, thank you. That's really good advice. And just to touch on your point where cooling centers are, that's also going to be part of like the learning that we do. Thanks to like the data that the county is collecting, but also as part of the readiness survey that we're gonna do, we're going to look at, existing cooling centers, usability, also like are there any gaps, and use that information to inform our decision for next summer. So there's a lot of learning that is taking place right now from the strategy that took place this summer. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just wondering, I've heard up in Phoenix, I don't know if it's happening in Tucson yet, but they have a mobile team that goes around and actually does IV hydration because they're finding people dangerously dehydrated. I don't know if that's happening yet.
Delma's gonna talk about that.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Can you discuss the thinking that went into determining the worst case scenario you're trying to plan for?
Mhm.
What
Well-
is the worst case you're planning for?
Yeah, the worst case scenario is, being in a extreme weather event without power. And so, in terms of planning for that, we still have a long ways to go, but that is going to be part of the Resilient Hub planning grant. So, to look at this worst case scenario and what we can do at the neighborhood level, but also what are the lessons that we can take from that for a larger scale.
Yeah, the University of Georgia published a study a year or so ago that looked at several cities, including Phoenix. And their scenario was major heat wave, 2 day power off, and 3 days to restore it. And they were predicting 13,000 dead and 800,000 injured and needing hospitalization. And 42 cooling centers is great, but it needs to be about 20 times that. And
Or-
I'm wondering if
yeah.
we're thinking about that.
Yeah, we are thinking about that part of like the evaluation of the existing cooling centers, but also moving beyond that. Because we do have larger spaces that in case of an emergency like that could be activated. And so, this is preliminary, I would say, but we are in conversations with TEP to potentially have a microgrid at one of our recreational centers that will have that capacity for battery storage. And for instance, the Donut Lake Center sees 5,000 people per month. And so that capacity there is huge in case of a disaster like the one you're describing. And so we're looking at that larger scale. What is a place that can hold people during a disaster like that? Part of that analysis is also going to look at transportation, right? Because not everybody can get there. And that preparedness plan, how do people know that this would be in existence? So again, we're like in early stages, but that is part of where we're going, where Mayor and Council have asked us to go towards. So again, a lot of learning this summer, but yes, we certainly need to be thinking about those.
I'll write you
Yeah.
a few notes, but I think you have an opportunity to greatly expand that network pretty
Yes.
cheaply.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for bringing that up.
I have a question, Fatima. So you mentioned that a lot of the urban heating that happens is because of all of the vehicle use, right? And so there's a few, I mean, definitely the fare free transit is an opportunity to incentivize people to utilize public transportation. And I hear this a lot from people, people are afraid to use public transportation because of a lot of the drug use issue that is happening around the bus stop. And really personally too, I have a 14-year-old who does ride public transit. I don't ride public transit and I would like to, but a lot of the routes that exist, First Avenue, Stone Avenue, I'm like, you can't, I'm not letting you ride. So I'll drive him instead of letting him get on the bus at certain routes mostly because of the bus stops and what's happening at the bus stops. And I was gonna ask Benma too, is there any plan in place or is there there's open fentanyl use. There'll be 20 people I don't know if they're getting on the bus or not, they might not be, but they are hanging around the bus stop. And it's not all the bus stops, but I can tell you which ones, because I drive by them all the time. I would like to stop using my car so much, but I'm like, I don't have to use the bus stop, you know what I mean? So, yeah. No.
Yeah, that's certainly something that we have heard, and I know that, I don't know this, but the new kind of like proposition that the council or city staff is bringing forward, I think it does include some ambassadors for the buses for like that safety purpose. Of course, it has to go through the voters and but that's part of like the proposal. So folks are aware of that. Emma?
Yes, exactly. We are utilizing data mapping through 911 calls to identify these hot areas, and we are using all the data to apply for new grants to prevent drug use and address the issues that is causing in the community. So that is coming. It's a lot of new things that the city is doing. We're trying to innovate and address the issues that our constituents and the community are facing. So definitely, we recognize that and we work. That is absolutely. Yeah, I would really like to know what you can do about it, because like, yeah, they've set up shop at the place where we get off the bus near our house. And we see that the police come and might throw them off like they like to be at Alvernon and Speedway. And we saw them get onto the bus and move over to our neighborhood, so I feel like there needs to be places probably places for them to do drugs.
Right.
Because they're here, they're like all over our neighborhood. The stores want to move out. Two of our people in our shopping center in our neighborhood have moved out because they're going to the bathroom, they're breaking the windows of the store. We need to have like places where they can safely do that, like they have in other countries, and stop saying not in my neighborhood because they're already in our neighborhood. We're working on all that. We're working with the businesses. I wish I can say, yes, this is what, but we utilize, the data, we're listening to the business owners, we are creating workshops. And we trying to come up with solutions. So one of the things we're thinking about, because Housing First, we have an outreach team, and that's exactly what we do. We work with the unsheltered community. But we don't have all capacity to do all that, right? So they're trying to get a group of professionals that will work just in addictions and how to address these issues. So all that is under conversations right now is professionals that will focus just on that specific issue and how to address it. So it's coming, it's part of the conversation. So please, go to your council meetings, go and let, voice your opinions. This is what mayor and council needs to hear. Your concerns, and if we don't have the data, unfortunately, to back up what we see in the community, is not much we can do. But with your support, and then we can use the data and apply for grants and create new programs that will help us.
Yeah, and I guess just from our perspective, for us, it was very important to provide heat relief to everyone because they are our neighbors. And so if these kids can save lives, we wanted to provide them, and we saw how much they support. I know that there's a lot of underlying and overlapping issues and concerns across the community, but for this particular work, it was very humanizing, like these are our neighbors, and nobody should be dying from extreme heat. So that's the work that we did this summer, but I know there's a lot more interconnectivity with other programs that it's addressing the larger issue.
Well, I just want to say something about my fear is I know that you guys are doing all good stuff. I care, about the climate stuff. All this stuff is so wonderful, that you guys will be voted out. Because what people see in their own neighborhood, they see these people doing drugs right in their own neighborhood. And, when the police just, have them move to the next street over, that's what they're seeing, that's what they're experiencing.
Right.
So I hope that you guys will do the stuff that neighbors see so that you'll be reelected.
Yeah.
Seriously. Because it's on next door and people complain about those things on next door and they all agree with each other. So, yeah, I care about your job.
Thank you. I'm not an elected official, but I
No,
know
but
what-
you're.
yes, I know what you're saying, and yes, I would say that the proposition that it's in front of mayor and council that might come to the public addresses a lot of the safety concerns of the community and will significantly bring funding to address that. So hopefully that would. Okay, thank you so much for your.
So Anna Cato is our next speaker, and I was at a Southwest Integrated Field Laboratory gathering, was that last month? Second month already. And the NAU team, Kevin, no, I can't remember Kevin's last name.
Gurney?
Gurney, right? Is it up there? Well, he was talking about what they were doing, and part of it was almost like a heat map gathering. People gathering data, but they came up with an app that any of us can download on our phone. And that helps track some of the data about where cars goes. I'm not sure about the heat, but Anna's gonna talk a little bit more about that.
I try.
Yeah, and then again, this app is available for us to download, so they can gather data for us down here in Pima County. That's my understanding also.
Every year in the US.
Yeah, so you know, it's still in the testing phase, or kind of trying to see what kind of data it produces for us. You know, it's all about data these days, right? You know, that we can plan better, if we have better data, we know what's happening out there. So I thought, oh, well, this is great. There'll be a bunch of folks here today that can download it, and you can start using it and start tracking down here. And then you can tell your other friends, and then we can just gather much more data for us down here in Tucson. All right, good. Anna, if you want to introduce yourself. Sure.
Good morning, everybody. So as introduce myself. So I'm a postdoc coming down from NAU. But actually, I've been like traveling around these days and just flew back from Maryland. I'm having a little bit jet lag today, but I do my best. So as she told, I'm from NAU. So heat is not quite an issue for us. We are more interested in climate change, emission quantification, such like that. But as she explained, we are part of the DOE funded project, which is tackling the extreme heat issue in the Arizona. And quantifying emission, CO2 emission is also important to better understand heat. Hopefully I can explain some linkage between heat and emission in my presentation. So the topic of my talk today is how we could improve CO2 emissions and anthropogenic heat. Anthropogenic heat means by consuming oils, gases, natural gases, you also produce heat directly. It is part of the heat going into the atmosphere, interact with the atmosphere, and eventually goes into climate change. Right? And I want to get involved citizen science to improve the CO2 emission estimates. All right, so I am a postdoc working with Dr. Kevin Gurney at NAU, and let me introduce what our lab has been working on. So we have been funded by NSF, NIST, and also currently DOE to help develop and provide emission due to human activities. Really very fine spatial and temporal detail. This can go down to 1 kilometer hourly spatial temporal resolution across the US. That is called the Falcon project, as we can see in the light here. So this product could give you CO2 by different emission sectors, such as on-road, on the road segment, airport, railroad, commercial building, such like that. And we can provide emission by different field type at hourly time scale. So this special data can go down to road segment and buildings. On top of that, we've been working on CO2 emission estimation by consuming electricity as well. This is indirect emission, so electricity is produced by power plant, but we are the end user actually using electricity. So each individual should be responsible certain amount of CO2 emission just by using electricity. And finally, we started working on some air pollutant. This includes NOx, SOx, VOC, PM, and also anthropogenic heat. We also want to touch on methane emission, but that one needs some work at this point. And also, with this DOE funded project, we have another project called HESPIA, which you can see the map just down in the US map. So this is the CO2 emission map for Tucson area that we are working much more effort to get more detailed CO2 emission map. So our US-wide product is already variable to do some GHG inventory comparison. Just subset the area of your focus to compare with state GHG inventory or county GHG inventory. I actually did comparison with Arizona state GHG inventory with our bottom product, and it does give me really good results. The difference is like almost less than 1%. That was really good. This one was for 2021 annual emission though. But other than that, so we've been working, spending a lot of time to get a really detailed emission map across all of the Arizona. And also some specific focus on 3 urban domains, which is Tucson, Phoenix, and Tucson. To do that, we need localized data, such like tax assessor data to get more detailed building information or traffic volume data. So I already got data from Arizona DOT, NPRs, including PAD, PR Association of the Government, but we need more information. So this is just an example of 2021 CO2 emissions for the 3 main urban domains, that's Phoenix and Tucson. In this map, what I want to emphasize is that so warmer color means higher emissions. So this is the map for the 100-meter mesh CO2 emissions. You can see emissions are kind of dictated by on-road. And right side is showing the emission contribution from different emission sectors. The brown color is the emission from on-road vehicles. So you can see in these 3 urban domains, all cities says the emission contribution from on-road sector is quite a lot. So improving the accuracy of on-road emission is quite important.
What did you say the ONR stands for?
Oh, so that is on-road, so it's just an
On the road?
abbreviation of on-road. On-road,
Like on the road?
yeah, on-road, on the road, yeah, vehicles, on
Yeah.
the road, sorry. And then in terms of the heat, so this is the fraction of the contribution for anthropogenic heat emissions across all cities. So building is the biggest source of the heat emissions, but on-road sector is the second largest contributors. I just want to emphasize how important to better understand emission from on-road sector. And then just try to find some linkage between heat and emission, and maybe get oily as well. As I said, those 3 fossil fuel emission, anthropogenic heat, and air quality all correlated. And understanding all of the components is really important to understand urban heat island as a big picture. And I want to also emphasize fossil fuel CO2 emission qualification and mapping a little bit advanced compared to other 2 components. So just by improving the accuracy of fossil fuel CO2 emission can benefit better understand what is going on the urban heat island issue. Anyway, so going back to this, my flow chart. As I emphasize, understanding on-road emission is important, and we want to put more effort on how we can further improve the accuracy of on-road emissions. So this is the entire motivation to moving to another important topic of my talk. So we are being aware that the one of the weakness in developing accurate road segment level emission is to get the fleet distribution. That means how many passenger cars, how many trucks, how many buses are existing on the each road segment for a given time. This type of information has been available at the really large scale, like county level, because you have to register your car to the county. Then we know at the total, at the county level, I know how many passenger cars are registered, how many buses exist, but that is not enough to get the fleet distribution for each of them. Then our lab are kind of thinking of, well, maybe we can use just human to get count at the road segment, and we can develop a phone app to make it easier to get such data. So that is the entire motivation to develop the phone-based traffic counting app, which is called Hastier Traffic. So this one was developed by the master student from our department. So I am from engineering department, and there are a lot of computer science students. They are really good at doing some kind of computation, and we just give some advertisement. Okay, who are interested in developing a phone traffic app counting people? And then this student, Tali, develop the beta version of this app in 2 weeks. This is amazing. But anyway, so we've been working on with him, and this band is now available at App Store. So if you scan this QR code or just type in App Store, Hastier Traffic, you can just find it. It's free, and I will give you some instruction how to use the data, but I'm not gonna go through entire training section today, but just want to emphasize that it is available. It's publicly free. Android version is coming up. It's developed, but needs some test user subjective right now. So this QR code will take you to the Google form to sign up as a test user, and then we can work together how to get through the training section. So this is how the app look like. So once you completed some training section, well, it will ask you to watch like 8 minutes training movie to understand the background, how to use the app. Now you unlock all the functionality, launch the app, standing next to the road segment, and it will fetch the location where you are standing at. And then you will tell the app, okay, you are watching a two-way road segment, one-way road segment, and then you will just start counting the traffic on the record. We so far have 6 different vehicle types: motorcycle, delivery truck, buses, passenger car, large and small, and then big wheels. So you just tap this icon, and then it will finally give us the count of that road segment for the particular time. So to test this app, within this during funded project, last summer we had 3 intern students from ASU and Maricopa Community College to help us how this app is working well. So the long story short, it works. It was amazing, and students collected more than 70,000 vehicle counts in 2 months. That was amazing. And this is a map where students went and collected data. And because it was a short summer intensive, we couldn't send a student down to Tucson, so we do not have data yet. So I'm here to ask you to some help to get some data and give us some information of the fleet down in Tucson. So we appreciate any data for any dates, ideally different day of the week, time of the day, for 6 different people categories at variety of locations. So just to summarize what I taught in my slide, so we've been working on CO2 and anthropogenic heat emission quantification and mapping. We have a lot of input in our model, but your data will help us to include one of our model input. And on top of this traffic counting citizen science activity, there's another one, maybe one of you are familiar with, but there is another NAU researcher called Helen Rowe. She's from agriculture department. She's also involving plant sampling. And this plant sampling data is also used to evaluate the output of our emission data. So there's a lot of capability by involving citizen science to improve our CO2 emission data. And I'm also happy to provide this emission data itself if the city, county, or even just a researcher from U of A are interested in having emission data for your research itself. Okay. Enough talk. So now I just want to open up this opportunity to talk and discuss what and how we can collaborate together to deploy this phone app down in Tucson, because there are many challenges. I do not have better connection down here. Who should I talk to? Who should I reach to? Student group, NPO, NGO, or one of you, the faculty of U of A, might be able to use your class to advertise this app in your class. But anyway, I need your input to just, how to say, get things keep going.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
When's the Android app going to be ready?
So it is already ready to use, but just we need volunteer to ask the Android app to completely release to the public. So they need some requirement about, I think, 20 test users to ensure the app is okay to use. But so far we only have 8 users to confirm the app is okay. So if you could be one of the 20s
You've
to
got that
just
now. So
get
there you
rid
go.
of, the requirement. Yes.
I'm confused as to how this thing's used. If I've got it on my phone, what do I do? Sit at the bus stop and punch it?
Yes.
Okay.
It's really user friendly. So the app itself is kind of self-explanatory. So you just need, maybe I will go back to this slide. So once you open the app, it will automatically fetch the location. You don't need to do anything. You just need to click this icon. Then the phone itself has GPS location in it. So it will automatically get your location. You just need to tell you're looking at 1 way or 2 way for which direction, and then just tap on the icon. And then lastly, you will just submit the record. And the data will directly automatically go into the system, and we can access to your record. Yes.
Yeah, I'm just curious how long this study is gonna be live and you're gonna be analyzing the data.
So we just started several months ago. We do not know how long this will continue, but ideally forever. We are still, how to say, analyzing how reliable this data is, like getting error statistics, or how long is enough to represent one segment or something. Yes.
What is the end goal of the information that you guys are trying to collect from this? I get it's from like emission from vehicles and everything. But I guess the question is like, what are you gonna do with that info?
Yeah, so to, I think I need to explain how our model is working in a little bit more detail. So we have emission at the county total level. So we have emission from passenger buses, trucks at the county level, and we are downscaling the emission to individual. So say, if I know the number of trucks, passenger car for every single road segment, we can better downscale the CO2 emission, the county total to road segment across all Tucson, for example. And if we can get the data from different time of the day, we can get the temporal distribution of CO2 emission for each road segment with considering the fleet distribution. Okay, so we have, for example, 1 kilogram of CO2 emission for 10 AM, but 80% coming from passenger car, 10% coming from trucks, blah, blah, blah. So ideally, at the end, we want to get this detail of data. Well, that will take a lot of time and effort, but yeah, that is our ultimate goal.
So on that, right now, Pima Association of Governments is doing a traffic survey. So does this work with something like that, or is it the same or comparable?
So, yes, it is something valuable to be compared with. So I am aware that PAD and ADOT are also doing some counting as well. So they have continuous counting location. That is more like a sensor. So there's a big tube on the road, and they're just counting the vehicle just rolling over the sensor. So we could compare what they are counting using the sensor with human beings.
Yep.
Of course, but the data points are quite sparse. They are mainly focused on interstates or major road, but we want to know vehicle counts at the residential road, local road.
Yeah, so the travel survey that PAG is doing right now, is like, do you go to work by yourself? How far do you travel? Do you do any what is it called, when you do with other people?
Ride sharing.
Ride sharing, right, or bus or bike. I don't know, does it work with that, or?
That info is also useful, or maybe something on top of, but we want to use it now because we do not know the origin and destination type of thing. Yeah, that is additional something we can work on.
So is this a point in time data that you gather? You switch it on, you answer the questions, and then it just a point in time and place?
Yes, location and yes, counts.
I know my husband does this for PAG. He'll stand at a certain corner, then he chooses a couple of times at different times. So maybe these types of volunteers would be willing to do a little bit more.
Sure, yeah, I wanna, collaborate with the project that is already being in place, and then we can just compare and contrast each other, or maybe our app can help them to expand their capability as well.
Yeah, that's the PAG that Irene was talking about.
So most of the data you have right now is Maricopa County?
Well, actually, I need to say from Flagstaff, because the Phoenix data is what student collected last summer. And Flagstaff, partly us and some student up there.
How are you getting the word out in Maricopa County?
That is a challenging part, yes. So I'm asking the faculty member from ASU to just, advertise this app in their courses, or we have 3 students, we had as intern and asked them to be an ambassador to spread the word. But yeah, this propagation part is one of the challenges.
I'm just thinking the applications within this grant, Swiffle. The application for heat mappers just opened up, and if we can identify some students that could work with you, but work with you locally, that could be an option within that program.
Yeah, that is a great suggestion. Students are always really good to spreading the word and do some work. And if there is any like courses or whatever that can guarantee some kind of credit for the student, that might work even better. But maybe that is a little bit too advanced at this point.
Thank you. Any questions? Download the app if you have an iPhone.
Yes, and even if you're an Android user, I'm really appreciate your.
Yeah. We're running a little early, so you can take a break, you can mingle. Lunch will be coming shortly. Thank you. Thank you. There's some great scones. There are some scones that are savory, so if you like ham or prosciutto or something, they're the one that has the most. I had one of those, they're very good. And then there's some that are kind of cranberry and creamy. Thank you.
Irene, I love your beautiful ones. I see it came from me.
Online.
Oh,
Oh, you're Janice. Oh, so Jennifer's online. And so the two of them will coordinate their presentation. And so if you want to introduce yourself, or is she doing it all?
I think she's gonna leave, yes.
Okay, so Jennifer, if you're going to leave, that's fine. Thank you for being here and thank you for letting us know what's happening to our pets and the animals that are out there and how heat is affecting them. Take it away.
Jennifer, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself. We'll check your volume. Yeah, go ahead.
All right, I'm just gonna check everyone can hear me okay.
Thumbs up from the back of the room, yeah.
All right. Thank you everyone for the opportunity to participate today in this workshop. The presentations have been really interesting and I can already foresee some potential collaboration. So we're excited to talk to you a bit more about what we are doing. I've been asked to talk a little bit about the veterinary school itself. So I am a faculty member at the College of Veterinary Medicine. My specialty is veterinary public health. And I'm going to talk about the vet school because we're relatively new in the community. We started in 2019. And then I will lead into some of our One Health associated activities, which is the area that I specifically work in, and roll it over to Janice, who is a DVM candidate. She'll be graduating in 2025, in August 2025. So she's in her clinical year now. And she's been doing a lot of work on One Health and heat resilience in animals. And so I will have her end the presentation off with an overview of those activities. All right, so I'm going to talk about specifically about educating the next generation of One Health veterinary practitioners. And I'll tell you a little bit about what that means to me and to the college. So as I said, we're a relatively new college. We opened our doors in September 2019. So that was our first class. And we're also a relatively unique veterinary college in that we have a very different model. So we have a 3-year model. There's a couple others out there, but very few. And the goal of that is that the students are working and earning their salaries faster. So it's probably a lot of you know, any professional program or any sort of graduate work just continues to incur debt for students. And so the goal is to have them working and earning faster. There's no less material covered than a traditional 4-year program, but we go throughout the summer. So it's quite an intense program. Another very, I would say, innovative piece of our program is that we are a team-based active learning program. So we are a lecture-free program, which was brand new to me. I'd never done this style of teaching before. It's been a great experience, and I really value it. And I think I'll find it difficult going back to a lecture base if I ever do. But what that means, and I'm going to go forward and then come back to that slide, is that our students are given what we call pre-work. So approximately 2 to 3 hours per class session. And class sessions are usually 2 to 3 hours as well. And this pre-work is material that is designed by the instructor in partnership with an instructional designer. And it's presented on a variety of platforms like Pressbook. We have our own platform called Allele. And the students work through this pre-work prior to class, and there's time built in their schedule to do this. And then the goal is such that they come to class where they are prepared with the material that they've been given. And when they are in class, they complete a short quiz to assess their knowledge based on the pre-work they were given. And then they go into teams, and these are teams that are established at the beginning of each semester. They stay in these teams for the entire semester, and they redo the quiz in their team. So that gives them an opportunity to engage with their peers, discuss where they had confusion, and try to refine that as a group. And then after that, we review all that with the class. And then the students remain in their teams to work on case studies or activities that is directly related to the pre-work. So in class, it's what we call an active learning environment and a collaborative active learning environment. And then our final piece that makes us fairly unique and different than some of the other veterinary schools, the more traditional ones, are that we have a distributive clinical model, which means we don't have a teaching hospital, but our students go into various clinical practices. So it could be a specialty practice, a general medicine practice. It could be with the health department. It could be with the state vet department. And these are distributed across the US. And these partnerships are growing in number each year that we have been in place. So it's higher than 300 at this point. And they do that for their entire 12-month clinical year. So Janice is about, I guess, a little ways into it. So she's doing a great job this year. And then just to give you an overview of our 3-year program, we have running across the first year and a half what we call our systems courses. So you can see, I'll just grab my pen here. We have foundations, which is basically just a general introduction to get everyone on the same base. And then we start working through our systems like self-defense, musculoskeletal, vital circuitry, gastrointestinal, etc. From there, they sort of bring it all together in the sum of all parts, and then they move on to clinical management. So advanced clinical management in companion animal, advanced clinical management in large animal, and then a series of selectives or essentially electives where they have shorter courses that are focused on specific materials that may be of interest to them. And that will come back when we talk about one of the One Health selectives that we have worked on partnership with the College of Public Health. Now, at the same time, running longitudinally, we have these professional skills, clinical logic and doctoring, and One Health in One World, which is where I come in, and I teach this course that runs across the first 4 semesters of the program. And then I also teach some selectives in One Health. And then down at the bottom, we have their clinical year. So that is their various clinical clerkships that happen throughout the final year of their program. And the goal is that this team-based learning or this active collaborative learning occurs throughout the whole program. And let me just move forward here for a second. Oops, there we go. Hang on one second where I lost that. That we look at this as a spiral model. So essentially they start with foundations and then they start to build their knowledge, and they keep building it through the systems courses, the multi-systems courses, the clinical courses, and their clinical rotations. And within that, the whole time they're working on their professional skills, their clinical logic, and One Health. So that integrates longitudinally as they go through their systems courses. And they're also working on this team-based learning and this case-based learning model that we employ at the school. Just to give you an idea, starting at the top was our initial applicant pool in 2019, and we are now at over 2,600 applicants, so a large number of applicants. Each year each class is 110 students, so that's a lot of applicants for the number of seats. And the feedback from this is what's been very attractive to students is the 3-year program, and also the team-based learning and collaboration that occurs throughout, which has very practical applications in the real world, in your workplace. And then briefly, our student demographics for 2027, we have the top states are Arizona, California, and Texas. And we also have international students from Japan and the Bahamas this year. So what I really love to talk about is One Health, and that's the area that I work in, veterinary public health, One Health. And just for those of you who don't know, I think probably most of you do know, but the One Health, the way the University of Arizona College of Veterinary Medicine and others view this is as the interconnection between animals, humans, plants, and their shared environment. And to me, that's really the essence of veterinary work. And so what does this mean in terms of making our students competent to be day one ready veterinarians that are both competent in One Health and competent in clinical practice? And to me, what it really means is that every day is One Health Day to them. So regardless of what they're doing, what problem they're looking at, they're thinking about it through a One Health lens or a One Health context, meaning how does this impact, or how does what I'm doing impact human health, animal health, and environmental health? And this is regardless of what area of practice they're in. And that's something we really work to explore with them, is how this can be applied in a variety of different settings that they're working in. So logistically, how do we prepare our graduates to be One Health practitioners? And from my perspective, this was a really wonderful job because it was such a perfect opportunity. In traditional veterinary schools, One Health has become an increasing focus, but it's trying to fit it in to an already well-established program, whereas we had the opportunity to grow our program from the ground up and integrate it into the program. We have an active learning approach and a team-based collaborative learning approach, which are really what One Health is all about. What makes One Health successful, or a One Health approach successful, is the ability to work in teams and work collaboratively. And then we foster innovative, adaptive learners and skilled problem solvers, which are all key competencies or key One Health competencies. And when I look at how we do this in our program, I like to look at it in this way. So using a Venn diagram, which is very popular in One Health, but what we want to educate our students in is the One Health core competency domains, which are published in the literature. We want to equip them with the One Health knowledge that is important to whatever practice they may be going into, and then apply that One Health in everyday learning and practice. And so we do this through a few different ways. This is not an inclusive list, but this is a list of some of the key topics that I focus on in our One Health course, so the knowledge that they are learning. And of course, this changes over time, and that's the beauty of it, is that it can evolve in response to what's happening. So we had a really hot year. Are we going to talk about heat and climate change? And that in general is a topic that's relatively new in veterinary medicine, I would say, and is rapidly moving up in priority, particularly in how to integrate education and information transfer on climate change, clean energy, sustainability in the veterinary curriculum. But this is just, like I said, that we do cover in terms of knowledge. And then we put them into practical application. And this is through the One Health in One World course series. So this is the one that I teach that runs the 4 semesters. I also teach 2 selectives, or these electives that happen at the end of the second year. One of them is non-traditional careers in veterinary medicine. So that explores what other careers there may be out there, either upon graduation or perhaps 10 years out when you're looking for a career change. And then a One Health transdisciplinary selective. And I highlight that because this was a new course that we did last year in collaboration with Dr. Heidi Brown from the College of Public Health and Dr. Julie Junberg from the College of Medicine. So we brought students together from all 3 colleges, and Janice was one of our students. And we worked on looking at a variety of key One Health issues and how we would approach that in a collaborative transdisciplinary manner. And transdisciplinary meaning that we also engage the community. And so through Dr. Brown and her relationships with the Department of Health, we were able to visit the Department of Health and also participate in one of the surveys that Julie mentioned earlier, which was surveying the staff and the administrators at the cooling centers as to what was offered in terms of cooling center facilities and what their needs were. So this was a really great experience for the students to engage with the community at a couple different levels, both with the health department and then with the various cooling centers. We have a variety of One Health clinical rotations, which are geared more towards what the individual student needs. And then another thing I wanted to talk to you about was our new veterinary public health residency. So this is a 3-year residency program that begins after graduation. And so all the residents are Doctor of Veterinary Medicine, so DVMs. And the goal, and this is based on a model that the 3 other residency programs in this area in the US also have, where the resident works with our community partners to work on projects that are relevant to our community partners and also help the resident learn. So it's a 2-way street and benefits both. And over time, we hope to build those partnerships so that our partners look to us and say, oh, this is a project that we think would be really suited for a resident. We'd like to contract them for 4 weeks, 6 weeks, a year. And these are the objectives we have. These are the deliverables we want. And that resident will work on that project to achieve those deliverables. So please keep us in mind. This is a bit of a ploy for that program, but please keep us in mind because we are at the stage right now of developing those partnerships for our new residency student who's. And then we have a Student One Health Club, which Janice will talk to you about, who through Janice's leadership has really taken on some great roles, particularly regarding heat resilience in people that are experiencing housing insecurity and their pets. We are also working on collaborative One Health research. We're growing this area. It's beginning to increase, and Janice and I just put in a proposal yesterday to support some of her work, a grant proposal in the heat resilience programming. And we have more to come for sure. We're really early in our stages of developing all of our programming, but are excited about it. And then just to end off, I wanted to show you some of the work that our students do. So each year in their team-based learning teams, their collaborative teams, I ask them to design a One Health logo that they bring all their different perspectives together and incorporate those in a way that is important to them and that they want to share with their peers. And then each year they vote for the one that represents their class for that series of courses. So on the left is our first year, the first class that ever went through our program. In the center was the logo that represented the class. On the right, the logo in the center represented that class. And then this is the logo that represented Janice's class of 2025. So now I'm going to turn it over to Janice. I'm really excited. I don't want to embarrass her, but she's really been a remarkable student in what she's taken on, in addition to the work she's doing of just learning how to be a veterinarian, but the extracurricular work she's taken on, particularly in the area of our heat relief initiative. So Janice, I'll turn it over to you and just let me know when you want me to forward the slide.
Okay, perfect. Thank
Thank you. So my name is Janice. I'm a veterinary student. I got involved a little bit with heat relief work when I was here. Actually, I did my master's in public health with Dr. Heidi Brown. So I was working a little bit on the BRACE project and the cooling centers, and then it kind of just transitioned from there. Like Dr. Wishni mentioned, I guess the former president of the College of Veterinary Medicine One Health Club. So this is a student-run organization. We have a lot of student involvement in the College of Veterinary Medicine, which is amazing. And so this is something that I existed and then kind of petered out, and then I restarted, and then we kind of went with this heat relief initiative. So I'll kind of discuss a little bit about that. So, and then this image is just at one of our heat relief events. So I'll explain a little bit more as we go through, but just so you kind of have a visual moving forward. And then next slide. Okay, so why people and pets actually? So thinking about One Health, and heat relief is an amazing example of One Health, right? So we have this relationship between people and their pets and the environment. And so people come with pets, like people love their pets. And there's actually a lot of literature that shows when looking at natural disasters and things like this, that people don't want to leave their pets behind, right? So this actually becomes a pretty big risk factor, that if people have to evacuate and they can't bring their pets with them, they're much less likely to leave a dangerous situation. You see instances of people actually going back to try and get their pet when they shouldn't be going back to a certain area, right? So thinking about how we can manage disaster events, or in this case, extreme heat, in a way that is pet friendly, really increases compliance and wellness for both people and for pets. So for this project, we got a grant from the Student American Veterinary Medical Association, and we kind of snowballed with that. So we were able to get a lot of community donations. I'll talk about that more a little bit later, but we hosted 4 total events. So we collaborated with the Auto Nation, and then we collaborated with Pima County and some of the cooling centers. And our main goal was to distribute items to reduce heat stroke risk in humans and animals. And of course, as we've heard today, there are amazing county and statewide initiatives to kind of focus on heat-related illness in people. But again, where is that kind of component of how can we integrate companion animals? Because especially when thinking about people facing housing insecurity, there are a lot of companion animals, and how does that integrate? And it's really interesting thinking about this between being out on the Auto Nation versus in town in these urban cooling centers, because the needs for people and their animals are very different. So when we're out on Auto Nation, we're really thinking about animals that live outside a lot. So how can we provide heat relief for animals that primarily live outdoors? That think about, we're giving away a lot of kiddie pools and tarps to create shade, and thinking about instructing people to hose down areas so the animals would have a cool place to lay down, and then general heat stroke awareness. And then thinking it's a little bit different in Pima County, people have a different set of needs here as well. And one thing that is interesting, we have this amazing cooling center network, as has already been discussed, but when I was discussing with cooling centers, and it was only a few, and I'm sure people in this room might have more information, but it's a little fuzzy sometimes about if you can bring your pet or not. Because a lot of the cooling centers will say, if you ask them directly, that they allow service animals. But they'll also say that we don't ask if an animal is a service animal, right? So it's kind of this don't ask, don't tell policy, like you show up with your animal, and unless that animal is demonstrating behavioral problems, they won't really question it too much. But that's kind of like a fuzzy area. So it's kind of interesting kind of having that conversation with people in the community, and then people working at the cooling centers. And I think actually a lot of the community cooling centers are pretty lenient in trying to make a nice safe space where people can bring their pets, which is amazing. And then this part of our project was mostly focused also on education. So just thinking about what are risk factors for heat stroke in pets, how can we identify heat stroke in pets, and then what to do if you identify heat stroke in pets, which is really challenging, especially thinking about people facing housing insecurity, because if you are already facing housing insecurity, it might be very difficult to come up with the resources to transport and pay for that. And then kind of sharing some of those resources as well. So next slide. Okay, so first thing, kind of advertising community engagement. When we were out in the Auto Nation, we actually I should acknowledge, we were really lucky to work with the veterinary clinic out in Sells, Arizona, and also with Carlos Aceves, who does public health emergency preparedness. They were amazing collaborators and kind of creating this effort. And it was actually a wonderful example of One Health because Carlos came out with all of his public health team. And we're really able to kind of make this whole kind of heat-related illness event incorporating both people and animals. And they were amazing in that we were able to get a radio ad out on the nation. So that was a main form of advertising there. I think that was actually extremely successful. It's a rural community. There's not a ton of foot traffic in the areas that we were, but we had really amazing turnout. I think maybe like 90 to 120 people, like we're getting about 50 people at each event. And we only did 2, but that felt like pretty good turnout. We're working with the cooling centers in Pima County. We asked that the cooling center staff kind of put out these flyers. I think this was probably a less effective strategy. So lessons learned, right? This was not the best way to communicate. And I think it's hard too when you're thinking about people who are facing housing insecurity. This just might not be the best way to communicate in general. We did have a lot of foot traffic in these areas, so especially at the Salvation Army Hospitality House, we have a lot of community engagement, which is wonderful. I'm not sure how much our flyers really helped, but things to keep in mind for next time. So the next slide. And then in terms of our educational component, I did have some classmates who were able to translate to Spanish, which was amazing. And then we were trying to provide information again on what is heat stroke. This is maybe a concept that some people are familiar with, like in humans, but of course it affects our pets as well. And it's actually we assume, I'll get more into this later because we don't have reported numbers of heat stroke in pets, but we assume it's a big issue here. I'm thinking about what are the symptoms, so how do you identify that? What are some risk factors? What should you do if you think your pet has heat stroke? And of course, we want to get them to veterinary care right away, but if that's not feasible, what are some other strategies? And then who can I call for help? And then we also had a lot of wonderful informational flyers from the Arizona Department of Health Services and some other resources that we were able to kind of distribute as well. We tried to not talk about those too much because we're not like human physicians, but just to have them available. So next slide. So again, here's an image of our item distribution. Our grant was pretty small, but we were really able to crowdsource so many materials. So big thank you to Tucson Water. We had so many possible water bowls, which was amazing. We got donations also from City Vet and a few other veterinary corporations, from the AZPMA, which is kind of a statewide veterinary medical association. And then as well as from the Department of Health Services at the state level. And so you can kind of see here, we have some various kind of, I guess, like pet heat relief kits that we were providing. So the kitty pools were really, really popular. We were able to give away also basic pet supplies. So thinking about pet food, we have some water bottles there. We kind of had bags for everything, shade umbrellas, sunscreen. Doggy sunscreen is really expensive, but we were able to at least discuss and inform people that that was a thing that existed, especially out on the automation. A lot of animals are laying in the sun. So the veterinary clinic in Sells was actually saying that they see a lot of skin cancer in dogs down there from animals in the sun. So that was kind of interesting. So next slide. And then part of what we did when we were working with our Pima County sites was thinking about data collection as well. And so we did this to assess the efficacy of our educational component. So essentially we just had a really basic survey in Qualtrics. So we gathered some baseline demographic information. We were asking people about how many pets you have, what number, what type, not assuming everyone has dogs or cats. We got some interesting like rabbits, reptiles, things like that. And then we had a series of true false questions about heat stroke in pets, just to kind of assess the community's understanding of heat stroke in pets. And so we asked these questions before we talked to them and showed them our educational materials, and then again afterward, the goal being to kind of see how effective we were at educating the community. And then we just wanted to assess a little bit about how likely people would be to seek out veterinary care if they did think their pet had heat stroke. And then we also, because that's not always feasible, kind of see what the main reason is why someone wouldn't be seeking veterinary care. So next slide. So our data was very limited. I will say that. So take all of this kind of with a grain of salt. We would love to expand more, and that's definitely in plans for the future. But some things that we did take away, most of the respondents were female. We did see a majority in the age range of 55 to 64. 35% of our respondents did identify as Hispanic or Latinx. And then 55% of our respondents identified as white. And then something interesting, 90% of respondents said that they were extremely likely to seek veterinary care if they believed their pet had heat stroke, which, right, like people love their pets. So kind of wholesome. In terms of barriers to seeking veterinary care, the most common barrier that was listed is lack of financial resources, which I think makes sense, but you know, there's some nuance there, so also lack of transportation. And then this is something that was a little surprising to me. One individual said that she could not lift her animal. So if her animal was recumbent or laying down, she would not be able to transport that animal to the veterinary clinic by herself. So that was kind of interesting as well. Next slide. And then again, this is like pretty preliminary, preliminary information, but in the blue, you see the percent of pre-survey questions correct, and then the red is our post-survey. So you do see an improvement, and we did get statistical significance on 2 of those questions. So question 19 and question 23, again, it's a really small sample, so, but you can kind of see that in our post-survey, we did have a higher percentage for the most part in correct questions. And you can see there some of the questions that we're asking. And then if you want to go to the next slide. So again, very limited data, but our preliminary data does suggest that community members, actually, if you want to go back to the graph, so we can just visualize a little bit better. Yes, so thinking about the ones where we have the most correct on pre-survey, so true or false, you should never leave your dog in the car during summer months. Almost everybody knew that right off the bat. So kind of hypothesizing a little bit here, but that tells me that maybe messaging about that is really, really strong. Like people have received that message. Don't leave your kids, don't leave your pets in the car, which is really great. And then we also had a pretty high percentage on our pre-survey get correct. If you suspect your pet has heat stroke, you should seek care immediately. Ones that were a little bit trickier was if your pet is panting, they probably have heat stroke. And then if your pet shows symptoms of heat stroke, you should put them in a cold ice bath to cool them down. And so with that first question, so with question 19, that I think also kind of hypothesizing here, but tells us that we could focus a little bit more on identifying heat stroke. What are the signs of heat stroke in animals? Because panting is a normal physiologic function in animals, but there is a point where it becomes problematic, right? So communicating that. And then the cold ice bath, I think part of that might be that it's a little bit different in human medicine. So they tell you different things for people rather than animals. But in animals, we get concerned about the blood vessels constricting too much if they're put into a really cold area. So that one was a little bit tricky. Again, super preliminary. All right, and then can you go to the next slide? Yes, so again, just kind of in conclusion, wrapping everything up. There seems to be a strong community knowledge not to leave pets in the car, which is really, really good. That's like our #1 risk factor for heat stroke. And community members also seem to be aware that heat stroke warrants immediate veterinary care. So again, kind of a question mark about this, but maybe successful public health messaging. And then we did see a significant improvement in accuracy for questions 19 and 23. So again, this is very preliminary. We would love to expand this project. Some of the barriers with this that I mentioned a little bit before is that, you know, I think reporting of heat-related illness is difficult in human medicine, but it's like literally not done in veterinary medicine. So we assume that this is kind of an ongoing problem in Arizona because it is so hot, but we don't necessarily have data to say like this is the incidence of heat stroke in animals. So part of this grant that we just applied for, part of it would be actually surveying veterinary clinics to kind of establish like what is a baseline incidence. And of course, that is also a little bit tricky because that's only the cases that get to clinic, right? So you know, how many cases of heat stroke in animals are going unreported, or not getting taken into the veterinarian. So that's kind of a challenge. And the other thing is just being able to measure improvement. So this is kind of an educational focus. But we would really like to expand to be able to evaluate a little bit more of kind of what are some of the barriers in the community, and then actually what do people need, what kind of resources. You know, we were kind of hinting at these heat relief kits. Hopefully that was helpful, but I think our bigger thing was trying to spread information, that in terms of surveying the community and really understanding like what can we provide that will make a difference for you and your pet. So yes. Anyway, main takeaway is that people and pets are really connected, right? And so especially as we think about heat-related illness, this is probably a big problem. Again, we'd love to have a little bit more data about how big a problem that people and pets come together. So just being able to kind of mitigate some of those challenges and really take a One Health approach so that we're helping both people and the pets. Yeah.
Well, I think it's great that we now have a veterinary school, you know, in our community, so things like this can happen, and you're looking at the health of these animals with these unhoused population. So that's great. And, you know, like the same question I had asked Julie earlier, where in humans, it was really difficult to get data out of hospitals about heat-related deaths and mortality stuff. And I can imagine that, you know, from veterinary hospitals or even clinics, that same issue exists because we weren't looking at that.
Yeah, I think in some ways it's maybe easier because you have more accessibility to data since it's not human data, but at the same time, different clinics, I suspect, I don't know, I don't know how medical records work, but I suspect it's less standardized across different veterinary clinics. There might be different ways of record keeping. Some places records only have to be maintained for 5 years. So in terms of longevity, kind of looking backward, there's some issues there. Yes. So it'll be kind of interesting to see if we're able to get funding, what that looks like. Again, I feel quite confident that this is an issue, but there's really almost no data besides like anecdotal evidence about heat stroke being an issue. Yes.
Good question. So what would you say is the estimated cost of the kits for pets? Like, are you gonna cost, and like also what did it include?
Yeah, so we started out kind of approaching it as a baseline kit, which was about $90, and included collapsible water bowls, water bottles for people, sunscreen. I think we had like tarps for shade in there, and some various other items. I think what we determined is that different people have different needs, especially because we were trying to target people facing housing insecurity, but we were not, you know, asking or clarifying, right? So I think different people coming definitely had different needs. So we kind of abandoned the kind of formal kit idea, I think, and we kind of just laid out items and let people select, especially because people, like some people had multiple pets, like some people were like, oh, 12 cats I take care of. So, you know, in that case, we didn't really ask too many questions, and we're just like, if you want to take like 12 bags of cat food, that's fine by us. So I would say it was pretty loosely structured. Yes.
Which item was the one that they were looking for the most?
I was in the kiddie pools. The kiddie pools were, we actually, like, we got rid of all our kiddie pools, and then people would come back later in the day and be like, oh, you have any kiddie pools? No, I'm sorry, we ran out. So I would say that was a big one, especially when we were out on the automation. Again, I think because our advertising was maybe a little bit less successful in town, we didn't really have people showing up and requesting specific things. Mostly people were just like, oh, like, what are you here for? And then they're kind of excited to get free things and free information. But I think that's also part of how we would like to expand if we do get funding, is to actually be able to assess community members and say, like, what kind of items would be helpful when thinking about your pets, or what kind of resources do you need? Yeah, yes.
So I work with the National Weather Service, and in a lot of ways, we're kind of on the front lines when it comes to communication of some of these challenges during heat episodes. And it makes me wonder, like, do you have outreach type materials? Like, I've never really considered. We know that humans and pets are obviously connected, but I've never really considered communicating what those threats are to pets. And you spoke about kind of the lack of understanding in the broader community about how to observe like heat stress and heat stroke in pets. Do you have like pre-made outreach materials for this? And if not, or if so, like would you be willing to share or partner on some of this?
Yes, absolutely. So I have flyers that I made. The flyers that I made were kind of really like simplified to make access easier. A lot of emergency clinics, like Veg is an emergency clinic, and they have like a great kind of heat stroke handout as well. So I can definitely send you my materials, but I would say you could also probably look at like corporate emergency hospitals, and a lot of them will also have some like really great infographics about heat stroke in animals.
I think the American Veterinary Medical Association, Janice, also has some materials.
It is One Health, right? People have to go to the environment. I used to do a UHI workshop for youths, and I would say that too. You know, the three important things is your health, your family's health, the environment health, it's all one health. All right, so the next one is Thelma, in the water in our division, what is it, I blanked out? Conservation and stormwater resources. We did a volunteer day with Housing One, and Thelma gave us a little information about what she was doing and how they were putting their packets together and how they were going out in the field. I bumped into Fatima, and she goes, "Oh yeah, I was out there handing them out with them and getting some surveys." And I think this is really valuable information, and I think all departments, so if the National Weather Service wants to volunteer, you know, you can set up a volunteer time and put some of these packets together.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Thelma Magallanes, and I'm the project coordinator for the City of Tucson Housing and Community Development Housing First. And I'm managing a brand new program called the Multidisciplinary Outreach Team. We applied for federal funding, and we were one among 8 communities nationwide to get this dollar amounts to work among the unsheltered community. We are a brand new program. We just started going out in the field at the beginning of the year. And the main goal of my project is to provide housing and stability among people experiencing homelessness. We also want to provide medical services and just in general, the well-being of the person that we assist. We are called the Multidisciplinary Outreach Team because we are working with other professionals. Like El Rio, we have a family nurse practitioner that is providing a lot of the street medicine. When we go into the encampments, we face really unique situations regarding health. And what makes us very unique is that we don't ask them to go anywhere. We are going out there providing the medical services that they need at that moment. We also work with all world community services to provide a lot of the behavioral health, detox, mental health providers connecting with work. And as us, the City of Tucson, providing a lot of the housing resources like permanent supported housing, a housing choice voucher, rapid housing, and now the city owns a lot of the shelters. So MDOT, Rio, what is amazing, and I didn't know, I've been working with the City of Tucson for 18 years and 14 years with the housing department. And collaborating with Rio has been amazing because if the family nurse practitioners and identifying any specific need out on the field, we have a direct contact to send them right away to the clinics and receive the services that they need. We were doing outreach on one of the encampments, and sometimes it's really hard, so sorry if I get emotional. But a female that the night before was under the influence and she fell into a fire pit. So the following morning when we're doing outreach, she was in a lot of pain, a lot of pain. And the family nurse practitioner was there immediately to provide services and then follow up, at the clinic, which is amazing. We're also dealing with a lot of pregnant women out on the encampments where they're not receiving any type of medical services, and El Rio is able to connect them with those basic service, which is amazing. It's definitely changing the way we're doing outreach. We also have OPCS that is providing a lot of the work connections. They have a very unique work program for homeless individuals. And we are trying to use those resources at the encampments. We're trying to work with a lot of people with lived experience because we realize that we have a lot to learn from them. And if we want to improve the way we are addressing homelessness, we need to talk to the experts, the people that have been formerly homeless and now they are ready to be part of community. And then as us, within our own department, the Housing and Community Development, we have created preferences to house the homeless. And we have programs called like the Homeless Preference Program, where people experiencing homelessness can come to the top of the line to receive a housing choice voucher, or also creating programs like rapid rehousing with Primavera right now that we're receiving federal funding to provide this type of services. Because we are a brand new program, the federal government had, the Department of Housing and Urban Development is providing a lot of technical assistance. So we are part of a group called the Housing Command Center, where we're getting providers that come to Tucson and help us create new initiatives to better address the needs of the people that we're serving. We're learning a lot. We are a brand new program, as I mentioned before, and we are trying to do things differently. We realize that housing individuals is not the only thing we need to do. Homelessness is caused by a catastrophic event on somebody's life and lacking the supportive services to recovering from that. So we're trying to create community, not only provide a house for them to go, but once they're housed, we're trying to provide the supportive services they're gonna need to remain housed and prevent, for them to return into homelessness. So it's a lot of things that we're trying to do, and this is the first time that the city, the government is asking the community to come and be part of what we do. It has, Irene mentioned, we're reaching out to our own city departments to come and be part of this, and I was able to collaborate with Fatima in her initiative to provide additional services to the unsheltered community. Let's understand what is happening in Tucson. Before the pandemic, we saw a decrease on the number of people unsheltered in the streets. But after the pandemic, from 2018 to 2013, we saw an increase of 60%. That's when we're receiving these grants, because we are in crisis. We're not saying we have all the answers. We're not saying that what the city and in collaboration with the county is doing is the answer to homelessness, but we're trying something new. We don't have the services to provide housing resources to everybody out on the street. And besides that, we cannot force them to receive our services. Everything that we do is data driven. So we do use data mapping through 911, 311, and the homeless protocol that is available to all citizens of Tucson. Everybody can log into the website and report encampments. We do have different levels on how we address the encampments. We have like tier 1, when it's only trash and debris on the area, and we have environmental services that will provide that type of services, that cleanup. Tier 2 is where we have residents at the encampments, not with the criminal element, and then is when we provide the services. Please know that every time we are abating an encampment or doing something at a city park, we always provide resources. TPD comes after us, but we always try to provide resources. But once again, we cannot force people to move into shelters or to access rehab services or take our behavioral health services. It's their choice. Somebody, when we were doing the voluntary events, somebody asked me, do you think we're gonna be able to end homelessness in Tucson? And the answer to that for me is we're gonna do it one individual at a time. When they're ready, we're gonna be there to provide those services. And if we're working on an encampment, and at that point they say no to the services, we know we're gonna come back to them and we still gonna provide those services. We're not gonna give up. So what we're doing right now is focusing on a lot of compassion. When we select an encampment, we work on that specific size from 3 to 4 months. We do outreach Monday through Thursdays, and we have a specific hours according to the weather. Right now, we're working from noon to 5 because we're getting ready for the winter months. We also work on Saturdays, and during the summer months, we were working from 7 to noon to provide those services. During the summer months, our objectives were to communicate to the unsheltered community the risk of heat. And we worked very close with Fatima's team to create a specific care packets that will provide the services that they needed for that specific time. We also work at the cooling centers, and we try to provide and promote health and safety during the extreme weather. Our unsheltered community don't really have access to the news or to the internet, to TV. So they don't know what's going on, right? So what we're trying to do, can you pass me one of those packets? So we distribute this care packets when we do outreach, and we were adding the flyers, like the one we used before. Everybody was able to receive a care packet with that information. And right now, this is the one we're distributing with the new cooling center, because October show, extremely hot weather. And Pima County, in collaboration with the city of Tucson, opened a new cooling center at the Mission Annex to provide additional services. And the way we notify the unsheltered community is by distributing these care packets and providing the information that they will need to reach out to us and to go to those centers. In addition to that, we also had a very unique new cooling center by one of the shelters, because we're not only focusing on the unsheltered community, but also on low-income housing. So through Section 8, we can also notify the people that are not able to pay high electric bills, where to go to get rescue. And we're gonna notify and inform it that these cooling centers are also available to them. The city of Tucson Parks and Recs also opened a lot of their locations, so kids, especially kids, can go and play and have a good time inside a place where they can be safe. The containers were located next to one of the city shelters, where people residing on those shelters can also utilize them during the hot hours of the day, especially when we have kids. So we created a space where they can go and be safe. My team also provided a lot of support, especially because we have a family nurse practitioner, and we were visiting the different cooling centers and see if they needed any type of medical services, and connect them once again with El Rio. So the cooling centers and MDOT, my team specifically work with the unsheltered community from June 1st to August 31st. Mainly notifying the unsheltered community about the options they have available. So at the city of Tucson, in addition to the container, we also have 8 other centers at the different Parks and Recs buildings.
And showers were provided to them, at those locations, at a lot of those locations. But we also coordinated services with our mobile shower trailer. And we had them on very specific locations, where people can easily access them. And I'm glad you mentioned that that made a difference when you were riding the bus, so good. Once again, the city is trying to do a lot of new things to provide the services that are needed out there. And what is so unique about what we're doing right now with the Mission Annex, that it was open 7 days a week. One of the things we noticed that the hours of operation needed to be more flexible and be more available to the unsheltered community. So on this last shelter, we decided to provide staff so it can be open 7 days a week. We are getting a lot of feedback, like Billy said, it's a lot of things that we need to evaluate and improve. But we're working on that. Just know that we're pretty open to feedback. We're pretty open to learn how to provide better services to the people we're trying to serve. And we're working on all that. But talking to my team, we realized that about 8 people that we constantly work with died during the summer months. And it's hard sometimes because we were like really close to getting them a housing choice voucher for them to move into housing. And to come and do a reach and find out that they passed because they were exposed to the extreme heat. It's hard. It's really hard. So one of the things we're doing is not only concentrating on the people that we serve, but also our co-workers. We're trying to provide a special training to provide secondary trauma. We are trying to provide, as Fatima said, new laws to protect our own co-workers from the heat exposure. Because it's really hard. A lot of them, especially because they have lived experience and facing situations like this really affect them. So as management, we need to be aware of that and work really close with, not only with the people we serve, but the people are part of the teams that we created. So the MDOT team was able to notify the unsheltered community about the options they had available in the community, but we also provided transportation. Our news practitioner was able to identify if they were suffering heat stroke or if they had any related heat illness. And immediately we were able to provide services transporting either to a cooling center or to the hospital, provide medicines. She was able to order, contact their clinic and order medicines, and the team will provide those services directly to the clients. One of the things that's amazing, as Fatima mentioned, is it's just great to see that the community is willing to partner and help whatever situation our unsheltered community is facing. One of the things we're doing with MDOT is creating these volunteer events, at least twice a month, where we create this type of care packets. And when the community comes and help us build this, it's more time that our outreach workers can be out on the street assisting the unsheltered community. Before, they were spending all this time in the morning, losing all these hours instead of being out on the field. So now that we have community members helping us, it's amazing to see the results. And probably this is not a lot, but this is what really helped us engage with the clients. There's a lot of trauma out on the encampments. The trust is not there, but by doing outreach constantly, the same hours, Monday through Thursday, and providing something is opening up the communication, is just getting their attention, helping them believe in the system again. And then it opened up, the door for us to start providing services. It's a story behind every homeless out there. Homelessness is not their first choice. It's not. It is not always drug related. A lot of people think that, but it's not. It's part of homelessness because once again, it's a lot of trauma and people don't always know how to deal with that, and that's when they're hurt to drug abuse.
But now what we're trying to do with our MDOT program is to invite the community, not only to create this care packets, but to do outreach with us. We're focusing on community groups, faith-based organizations. We're providing a lot of training through the federal government because there's a lot of funding available for them to provide community services. But a lot of times we're just not aware of what is out there. The government realized that housing is one piece of the homelessness issue, but we also need to create community so they can remain housed. And that's what we're reaching out to community members, faith-based organizations to help us with that second part. So we're trying to develop a pilot program that is called Adopt a Friend. That once somebody is housed, then we could connect them with community, somebody that will go in and have conversations with them, teach them how to maintain their unit clean, connect them with providers, take them to the store so they can buy groceries, do stuff like that. Just had somebody to talk to. Because where they were living on the encampment, maybe it's not the best, the safest place, but they were connected with friends, they were connected with people. And once we move into the unit, that element is missing. So community is a huge part of the success of somebody remaining housed. So that's what we're trying to do. This is, once again, the first time working for the city that I see that we are reaching out and asking for help, asking for feedback. We realize we don't have all the answers. And probably out there today, just talking Jenna, I'm just getting a lot of great ideas. So that's what we're trying to do, engage with the community, learn, take into consideration things that we probably never realized. So we're trying to really address the issues and learning more from the community. So we have the end that have the volunteer program. Once again, we're trying to get connected twice a month. We meet our building on the south side. We provide the outreach supplies, and we have groups of people, about 20 people per month, to come and help us do this. We also trying to create a volunteer group to do outreach with us. And we're gonna provide all the training so we can support the staff doing the outreach at the encampments. And anybody that is interested in doing that, please reach out to me. I have my business cards, and it's amazing to see that just by doing that, a lot of collaborations are happening. So that's how I started working with Fatima's team with Tucson Water. And it's working, and it's once again, it's rewarding to see that the community is really willing to help and be part of the solution. And that will conclude my presentation. If you have any questions, this is the time.
You have a meme about your training for the volunteer?
The what? I'm sorry?
Like a meme that can be shared on social media?
We are putting it on the City of Tucson website. It is available there. But also, just reaching out to me, I can provide those services. Once again, we're new, so we are trying to extend everything that we do. But that's the way we communicate inside our community. We also go to a lot of the work offices, and they put in the information on their letter. Goes out to the community, and a lot of the community members ask how they connect with us. Okay.
So you're putting different packets together for the winter?
Yes, we work with FEMA and they provide emergency blankets. We also create hygiene packets like feminine products, the heat relief packets. So yes, we have different care packets.
So do you guys go out with them when they go out into the field? The vets?
No, actually, when I was listening to your presentation, I think it will be a great collaboration. We do reach out to the Pima County PAC, and they're been assisting us with a lot of services. Because as you mentioned, they will not go into a unit where they cannot take their pets. Yes, definitely. So we're trying to remove barriers.
Yeah.
Even by transporting them, we have everything available for them to bring their animals with them.
just to go to an intake appointment, if they're not able to bring their
Yeah.
pets, they're not taking the services, so.
Yeah.
Yes, they are very important, they're really attached to their animals.
Yeah, like I said, I think it's fortunate that we have a veterinary college in our community.
Yes, absolutely, yes,
So I think that's great, to think about that connection.
yes,
with the
and I was
pets.
thinking about that too, yes,
Thank you.
so, thank you.
I have a question. It seems like has to be so much, like cross collaboration with other organizations in town because there's only so much that you guys can do in terms of outreach, so you guys are collaborating. Like, let's say the outreach team goes out to an encampment and somebody's like, yes, I wanna go to rehab, right? And then there's other organizations that are providing that service,
Yes,
correct?
yes,
And then what about when they're done with rehab or with detox or whatever it is, like. There's gotta be like, se tienen que mover bien rápido, right? Like,
Right.
okay, is there housing for this person so they don't have to go back out into the street after they've completed?
right,
Detox,
and what
right?
it makes this program very unique is that we provide those supportive services. So we not only gonna, during outreach, provide the detox services, but
Yeah.
also we gonna provide oral contact information, so once they're over and done with that specific service, then they can reach out to us and we can definitely connect them to housing or the rest of the services that are available to them.
Is there a case manager that sees them through the whole process?
Yes.
Oh, and who
Yes.
provides the case management?
We have two other agencies that were awarded federal funding to provide those supportive services. We have Community Relations and OPCS. They're also receiving money to provide the permanent supported housing services along with supportive services.
Yeah.
So yes, with not only housing, that we do the first part, the outreach, but then those two other agencies are doing the rest. Not, the services don't end once we house them, but they constantly work with them on all the different services that they have.
Yeah. And you talked about housing and security prior to the pandemic and then since the pandemic, and I think I had told you before, I had, my sister was homeless, but this was in the early 2000s and it seems like being unhoused and being addicted to drugs is so different now. It's so much harder. Like, it just seems like it's not. Back then, it was hard, but it just seemed like there were. More. The person wasn't like doomed to that. Now it just feels like to get out of it is so much harder. And I don't know, my perception is that the drugs that are available are just very, very different, very.
Right, definitely, they're more accessible, inexpensive, and for the data that we are, it's not a lot of data that are yet, but we studying that and the effect. And probably the Julie, we can talk more of that, but the high that they're getting from it is higher. Yes. Yes.
So do people going into rehab, they go through methadone because it's.
Different options is at that point, it's gonna be up to those
Yeah.
professionals to decide what type of services are better for the clients. But yes, definitely. And we do have a lot of people that during outreach are deciding to go into rehab. The fact that the city owns a lot of the shelters is helping us a lot to immediately, when they're ready to go into shelters, have those beds available. And our shelters are low barriers, so they can bring their pets, they can bring their significant other. So definitely, we are trying to remove a lot of the barriers so they can move into housing a lot.
Is the rehab available, how long-term is that?
Once again, it depends on the professionals. They do the assessment and they decide for how long they're gonna be receiving the services.
Could it be up to 6 months?
It can be, yes. Right now, working with the team, so far we've seen that a lot of 3-month services are being provided. So when they exit the program, they can reach out to us and we have the information actually, even though they're on rehab, we're still in communication or we communicate directly with the providers. And they will definitely let us know when they're ready to be exited from the program, so we can definitely keep working with them.
And our program just started going out on the field, the team just started going out on the field at the beginning of the year. And we were able to house at the end of July 31st, we were able to house 75 individuals. The percentages are not right yet because we were able to reach out to 201 and only 75 of them received or agreed to receive services. Once again, we cannot force them. We cannot force them to receive our services. But the ones that were able to receive them, 75 are housed right now. And once again, it's the beginning of the program, so we got this grant for 3 years. So we just started the second year, September.
It would be so interesting to hear what about from the people that did receive services, like what made them want to receive services.
A lot of the feedback we receiving from them is that the way we're doing outreach right now, especially because our colleagues are people with lived experience. So they're not giving up, they're not treating them like without value, I try, well, see you next time. No, because they, that situation, the way we're doing outreach is very and that's what we're trying to do, hire more staff with the experience because we can see the results. Not only among the unsheltered community, but the people that are willing to be part of the society, not the community, and get back to society, right? That's the opportunity. If the government is not giving that options, then where's the support, right? So we're trying not only for our own clients, but the people that are recovering from homelessness. So it's working really well, and that's what they're saying. The way that outreach is being provided right now is way different than what we used to do a couple years ago. Yes, and according to the last, every year the federal government, as everybody receiving federal funding to do a point in time count. Nationwide, all the agencies receiving federal money they go out the same day. And according to the last count, we had about 2,100 people out of the streets or on shelters in Pima County in city of Tucson. That was the number.
And anybody can volunteer to do that count, is that correct?
That's correct.
And when does that happen, what month?
January.
Okay.
The last week of January. Yes. Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Thank you.
A lot of work. A lot of going on. So this year I haven't, we didn't really have some hard data, as much because it was about what we did this summer. But the next one, Christy, is all about research. So U of A, ASU, and NAU, Anna was from NAU, we're all collaborating in the Southwest Integrated Field Laboratory. And this summer in July in Phoenix and Tucson, the 2 vehicles from Brookhurst in New York came out. They were loaded with a lot of data collecting stuff, and they came out. And one of the things they said was some of their data collection, kind of powered down because it got so hot. The IT stuff got so hot, so they said, well, we have to think about that now. But Christy is one of the field workers, works with WAG Key. And she's going to tell us a little bit more about the data being collected, what we're doing, and hopefully what we'll do with all of that information.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hi, everybody, and thank you for having me today. My name is Christy, I'm associate professor of urban planning here, and my background is civil engineering. So I'm not a climate scientist, and I'm speaking for dozens and dozens of researchers who are working on this project. So bear with me with some of this information, but my role in this project is really focused on coordinating the activities in what we're calling the Tucson test bed as part of the merger. So I'm going to take a step back and explain the program that we're working under at the Department of Energy, and then we'll sort of dig down into what we're doing as part of a lab, but then also in Tucson. So this is part of the Department of Energy Biological and Environmental Research Program. And the broader goal of this program is to take climate science, which is generally something that's provided or maybe at a level of a regional or a state level of information, and to really dig down into providing something that's more spatially and temporally disaggregate, so that we could start to answer questions or at least move it forward, the discussion around return on investment and thinking through combinations of strategies related to mitigating all sorts of climate impacts. There were 4 funded labs as part of this program. We were the 4th one. One in Chicago, Southeast Texas, Baltimore, and then the Southeast here in Arizona. In Arizona, all 3 of the major universities, the University of Arizona, Arizona State, NAU, Northern Arizona, as well as 2 national labs are contributing to this SWIFL project. In all 4 of these labs, we're doing kind of thematically the same thing, where we're trying to take climate models, collect a lot of data, and try and help the spatial and temporal resolution get more disaggregate, to inform specific questions and evaluate different solutions for our individual context. But naturally, we are representing the arid lands, arid environments heavier than any of the other 3 in the things that they're working on and dealing with. So within SWIFL, and I'm calling it SWIFL, the Southwest Integrated Field Laboratory, our goal is just that, but to focus on Arizona and Arizona context in all of our data collection and modeling. So we have 3 teams as part of our setup: the Resilient Solutions team, the Observations team, and the Modeling team. And then we have dozens of sub-projects that relate to small components of the modeling, answering sub-questions, or thematic questions that maybe don't directly relate to the test bed that are going on all the time. So Anna's presentation this morning is a great example where a lot of her work is helping inform the greenhouse gas models and the resolution of pollutants as they've been modeled and captured in space. But that is one of dozens of these efforts that are trying to help contribute to either the modeling or the evaluation of resilient solutions over time. I will reiterate that I'm here representing a team of over 80 researchers across the state and the 2 national labs here. There's so many things happening, and I want to give credit to Malini Roy, who has been helping me with some of these coordination activities, Amanda Grant, Amanda Lucero, who are my students now, who are helping me with this, and my other sub-project focused on mobility, and then Irene for participating as our stakeholder and helping us connect the dots here in Tucson. But then I included the other names of the other researchers and leadership teams in case you're interested in reaching out to other thematic areas, because there's so much happening. This is just a snapshot of what we're doing. The way that I am thinking about SWIFL is really a relationship between collecting lots of observations to inform either evaluating solutions or helping inform how local our models are representing heat as well as greenhouse gases. And then with that, both teams, or sort of both angles, we're looking to identify solutions or combinations of solutions so that we can evaluate and maybe start thinking about sort of holistic return on investment programming related to different strategies that reduce heat or help mitigate or alleviate pollution and greenhouse gases. So it's kind of a large effort, but it's really intensive observations that inform evaluating solutions or more realistic modeling for the state of Arizona, but also locally within the 3 main regions of the Sun Corridor. So specifically, I'm here to talk more about the test beds because we did have our first intensive observation period, so there was a lot happening. But I do want to give credit to our colleague Katya Limmer from Brookhaven National Lab. She shipped her 2 trucks full of instruments down on a semi truck and spent a whole month in Arizona, which my understanding, the other labs are only doing a week or 2 weeks. So I was very impressed with all of the things that she was doing. And I want to give credit because these are her slides and they are very technical, but I'm not going to go through all the details. They're going to be there as part of the resources so that you can read through if you want to know more about the instruments. So in terms of test beds, we have this loose definition of what a test bed is, but specifically, it's just an area where we're focusing intensive observations and activities across many of our different sub-projects and our groups, and so on. Tucson is unique in our test bed because we selected a corridor that we anticipate a substantial amount of change will occur. It's not just one corridor, it's the neighborhood surrounding the corridor, it's a whole area of the city. But in Flagstaff and in Phoenix, they had a very different approach. In Phoenix, they picked one site where there was a large unhoused encampment, and they were testing specific strategies related to tent shade and cool pavement treatment and other things to alleviate heat on a specific site. And Flagstaff was more interested in relying more on the modeling and thinking about scenario planning and sort of envisioning different strategies related to their comp planning at a city level. So all three of those are considered test beds, but it's more a spectrum of the scale in which we're trying to focus our energy on these intensive activities. In terms of how we're collecting data during these activities, there's lots of other types of data that was collected, but I'm focusing primarily on what Katya and Brookhaven did, which was related to 4 specific research questions. And in this first year, those research questions were really focused on helping build the resolution of our models and how we're representing climate in the area. So we had 4 basic strategies that primarily focused on this sort of built environment and the climate relationship. The people are in there too, but a lot of our other activities are really focusing on, you know, thermal home comfort, mobility discovery. I'm trying to think, there was another one focusing on project or recreational pathways and trails and heat exposure and so on. And we're using a lot of different data from this. It's not just the intensive observations. So I'm going to skip through some of these slides, but just so you know, they're going to be part of your resources, so you can always go back. We do have some access to digital twin, National Household Travel Survey, and then various stakeholder insights. We've been collecting and aggregating data from different sources and programs, I guess, including thinking about flooding, bringing together weather stations represented. We have these eddy covariance towers, which measure particles and gases above space. Some of them are permanent, some of them are temporary. We have various types of MARDI is like a miniature weather station. We also have mobile MARDI carts and other weather stations that we're installing. As Anna talked about earlier, we have these citizen science efforts related to the way in which we're modeling our climate or our greenhouse gases. So our plant sampling, our traffic apps. And then we have this huge field campaign, which includes 2 big trucks outkitted with a bunch of instruments, and then weather balloons released strategically and periodically throughout this. This was our schedule for the month. So each of the 4 colors represents the 4 research questions and the activities they were planning. She brought down to Arizona a whole team. And as Irene said, about a week into it, some of their instruments started failing because they didn't know how hot it would be, which is funny when you know how hot it gets here. So it was really kind of amazing they were able to finish that whole month and get through all of these activities. Really kudos to Katya and her whole team in these photos below. I did provide a fact sheet for these trucks in the resources that you'll have. So if you want to look at specifically the instruments that are on them, it is an amazing effort, but there's a lot there that even I'm not fully sure how they're going to use that data, including, you know, the eddy covariance towers, which I'm hoping to get down to Tucson this year to improve some of how we're representing Tucson versus Phoenix in our models. Oh, wait, by the way. Okay, so the 4 science objectives that she had on her intensive observation period, so we call it the IOP, so I'm sorry if I slipped that in there. The first one is thinking about intra-neighborhood variability in heat and weather measured over the course of the summer. So we looked at the sort of grid of how neighborhoods were being represented in the model. And she selected, I think it was 6 neighborhoods on a 1 kilometer scale and used her 2 trucks to route themselves through these neighborhoods over and over and over again over the course of several days, 45 hours of data for this one, spanning to better represent different neighborhoods and the built environment and the greenery in those models.
What city is that?
This is Phoenix. The first 3 are all primarily Phoenix. The 4th one is entirely Tucson. The second objective was thinking about the ways in which large green spaces, so think about Reed Park, are impacting the neighborhoods as you permeate out into the neighborhoods. Now, this was an observation in Phoenix, partly because they were able to deploy some of the other instruments. They were able to get access to deploy the instruments in this part. But then again, she took her 2 trucks and her teams and they released weather balloons during this period to sort of track the dissipation of the cooling effect of a large green space like this. The third and the harder for me to explain is the urban dome. In this one, she took her 2 trucks and she just started having them route all the way across Phoenix and into the desert and back again and again and again. And part of what she was tracking there was the atmospheric boundary layer and the way in which that boundary layer sort of dissipates and heat and weather and all the sort of climate variables dissipate as you track through the city. She did this primarily in Phoenix. My understanding is they took 1 day to do it in Tucson so that we could at least compare the impacts of the built environment of Phoenix with Tucson, which will be interesting, just as the differences in the size of our city and the scale and the breadth and everything. So that was our third objective. And the 4th is entirely in Tucson. So we picked Oracle neighborhood, and I'll talk about that a little bit in the next slide. But in this one, she took 1 truck and routed it back and forth through the neighborhood. And she took another truck and routed it across the city to capture some control areas that where we're anticipating maybe less change over time. This one was entirely in Tucson, and the goal here is partly to do this periodically as we have funds, because it was expensive to ship 2 trucks down, but to do this periodically so that we can measure change in these climate variables as associated with changes in the built environment, tree shade, and those sorts of things. So we did pick Tucson, the Oracle neighborhood, for a reason. When I'm saying the Oracle neighborhood, I'm really talking about the 4-mile track between downtown and River Road. And I'm talking about the neighborhoods that extend outward, so including Flowing Wells and sort of all the way down, maybe a ½ mile or so. We didn't delineate specific boundaries because we recognized that there were a lot of activities happening, anticipated development, and new grants, a lot of, green infrastructure campaigns coming in, and we didn't want to limit ourselves to a specific area. But we realized that within this corridor, we see all sorts of built environments. We have a high social vulnerability index, a gap in weather station information and data. So we thought it would be useful not only to contribute some of those measurements to the city and to that neighborhood, but also just to be able to see some of the changes and some of the environment differences. And just for reference, the city is doing so many things and the county is doing so many things that one of our biggest challenges, I think, is just tracking change along many different scales, because we are anticipating quite a few things to happen on different streets and in different neighborhoods, but all up and down the corridor and the surrounding neighborhood. So that's one of our big challenges for the next 2 years. In terms of the engagement process, we started about a year ago. I was not originally pegged to coordinate the activity. So when I started, we started working with Irene to invite people in and have conversations. And then we reached out to researchers who were working with other departments. So we have home thermal security people who have already been working with housing and community development. And we have, my background's transportation engineering. So I knew people who were interested in evaluating pool pavement technology. And we just tried to compile all of the different questions and ideas and solutions that were being investigated to frame the route in which Katya and other researchers are driving, so that over time we could start to inform the impact of some of these things, new development, tree shade on heat and climate in Tucson. And for reference, these were the primary themes that we're keeping track of. We're keeping track of other things, but the 2 routes are listed here. The northern route is a figure 8. It takes about an hour to drive a figure 8, so over and over again. The bottom route goes all the way out to Star Pass in Greasemore, and that the blue lines that you can see there are actually the cool pavement areas where they're installing sort of reflective, rejuvenating treatments, theoretically that reflect heat. And it rounds all the way around up past Reed Park and then back down. That Reed Park is where the first pilot of the cool pavement was. So that again takes about an hour to drive. They do it again and again. We picked these routes in part to align them with the home thermal security data collections, which is focusing on heat within homes of public housing and manufactured housing. And that's Mark Kerr, who works in the geography department here. We also wanted to identify places where green infrastructure had either recently been installed or we were anticipating. So some of these routes, we sort of go into neighborhoods where we know that there's going to be a complete streets update, for example. We wanted to hit the cool pavement because that's long been a question of evaluating really what are we seeing in terms of the differences. And then we have a faculty in Chris Lamb in public health who's studying air pollution at schools. And so we're coordinating our weather stations and so on with him and trying to hit those routes so that we can connect the data that Katya trucks are collecting with the data that other researchers are collecting, at least in space. And then our long-term goal, and we're hoping to bring Katya back, not this coming summer, but the summer after, and maybe 2 years after that, is to track some of the mesoscale built environment changes that we're anticipating. Generally, when we see bus rapid transit or especially things like light rail, we see investments in development like larger multifamily housing. Those are things that we know are going to probably affect the experience that people are having, maybe for the good or bad, I don't know. And so we long term, we're hoping to track these kinds of things so that we could see what those implications are on the types of data, climate data that we're collecting. Okay, so I think I have a few minutes left. Okay. I've been trying not to go over. I know it's been a long day of interesting stuff, but this is a lot of details. In terms of our next steps, we do have another intensive observation period coming, but Katya can't bring her team all the way down to Arizona again. So we're looking at what we're gonna do next year for our intensive. I'm advocating to get an eddy covariance tower down so that we have better particle distribution, greenhouse gas data collections. I'm also looking to get the people who have their MARTI carts, mobile heat and weather station data collections, especially to measure the impacts of green infrastructure at bus stops and parking lots, because I think that's a gap that we would like to see addressed. And then in summer 2026, Katya would come down and we'll probably repeat parts of what she did. So she'll come down and repeat the Tucson deployment for her data collection. And then we might vary some of the other 3 objectives depending on what she finds once she gets to analyzing all that data. There are a ton of related activities that are happening, so I just wanted to give a shout out in case any of these are interesting to you all. Lad Keith and Malini Roy are doing a neighborhood plan evaluation for heat resilience, so we can look forward to that. Kenneth Koproko, who's landscape architecture faculty, is holding a design competition, and I think it's focused around transit stops. So engaging with students who are interested in design in our landscape and architecture. And then we also have a Bachelor of Design, so I'm sure they're engaging there. I'm working with Malini and the city to install weather stations. So we're still waiting to get one on the south side near Tucson House. And we've asked for precipitation sensors because I think that that's relevant and important. And we'd like to get 2 installed as part of this project at least. And so if there are ideas for other places to install, we're interested in hearing your thoughts. Next week, I'll be meeting with the modeling group to start figuring out how we can represent different scenarios in the models that they currently have built. And so that's something I'll probably be reaching out to you afterwards to figure out what combinations of solutions and strategies we think we can represent and we wanna try for Tucson. I'll be doing a mobility discovery survey, which will launch this coming sort of summer. And there's 2 years of that funding. I realize my numbers are off there. Next year, we'll be focused on the general population of Arizona, thinking about the relationship between heat and travel and activities. But then the following year, we have a lot of room to hone in on the things we think are important to dig deeper into. So 2026 will be something slightly different in that area. And then we got additional funds from Department of Energy to evaluate this whole effort. And so Allison Meadow, Lad Keith, myself, a few others are doing a bit of a science of science evaluation. And we're working with all 4 of the integrated field labs now to help inform how this is all set up and whether we can do things to maybe improve and smooth things over. The first year, I'm gonna admit, was rough. I don't know that anybody knew what anybody was doing, but I feel like we're starting to know how to talk to one another and understand it. So we have a few more years left that'll hopefully even be better. I put this on here because I didn't realize Anna was presenting earlier, but just another call for her traffic app. And then we will likely be looking for a discovery fellow, somebody in practice to work with us to maybe get trained in using the Marty part to collect some more data locally in Tucson as well. One last call, we do have a newsletter. You can go back and look up our previous newsletters if you want to stay informed. And then otherwise, if you do have questions about any of this, I might not be able to answer them, but I probably know somebody who can, so feel free to email me too if you have questions.
It was definitely the more technical side.
Not questions, just like a comment, like it's amazing all the work that you're all doing. Definitely gonna sign up for the newsletter. And yeah, I'm just gonna watch you all. If there's any collaboration opportunities, please let us know. This is very important work to us. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And we are intending to make all the data available to anybody. And I think they're figuring out what that looks like. But if there are any data requests that we can inform, I don't even know what you might need.
Yeah.
We could maybe help coordinate that.
Yeah, maybe I'll follow up.
Yeah, anytime, yeah, feel free. And if I don't know, I know somebody will.
Thank you.
It feels like we're gonna need to know, not just in 2 and then another 2 years, like what the differences are in the data that you're gathering from the monitoring in those areas. Like there's gonna need to be data for further out, I think.
I 100% agree.
I just trees grow so slowly and
Yeah.
you know. Yeah, I was giving a presentation. I'm from the Storm to Shade program, which is the City Green Stormwater Infrastructure Program. I was giving a presentation on our program and you know, we're not regulatory driven. That's the Department of Transportation handles the MS4 permit. So one of our biggest mandates is really to increase tree canopy in the city. And somebody was telling me there wasn't sufficient data, somebody from LA, to support that tree canopy decreases surface or ambient temperature. And I was like, I didn't look it up afterwards, but I was at a loss for words, you know? So I'm like, please tell us.
I don't think that's right. I think there's a great paper called 50 Shades of Shade or something like that.
Oh, that's
But if you email me, I can find it. And I think we've seen this in our own measurements when we were studying the cool pavement, that it seems fairly obvious that that's one of the best strategies.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I go out with my heat gun and I see the temperature under a tree and the temperature not under a tree, and I'm like, there's a 30-degree difference.
Right, well, and that second science question where they're looking at sort of the dissipation of the high green area in Phoenix, I think is gonna be really interesting. I do think there's some relationship there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I actually went to a talk many years ago by someone from ASU who was basically saying what you were saying, or who were reporting that the temperature under a tree is lower in the day, but higher at night. And so there's, it's a balancing thing.
But this, I don't know, is anybody else informed on that? Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, I think maybe California or LA in particular, they're gonna get that Pacific coastal movement, and that's gonna impact their data, so you can't take a coastal data from a, from the coastline, compare it to Arizona, I think, and so maybe that's why they are not seeing anything, but
I agree.
you can see when, looking at radar approaching from the south, coming up from monsoon and how it splits around the city. And I don't think it's splitting as much as it does up in Phoenix where they have more concrete pavement and stuff. I think in Tucson, we're getting more, but we also have the mountains that help grab that. But I believe that it definitely impacts. I think our efforts do impact heat island effect and lower it.
It could be pavement related, if there is pavement acts as a heat sink. As well, so that could be part of what they're saying.
Yeah, and I think it's different in areas that aren't arid versus or areas that are arid versus very humid areas. What trees do in the day versus the night, because there's all kinds of like interactions that are happening that we're just not totally aware of.
And we want that. We want that cooling during the day. That's when we want it.
On your cool pavement issue, I've always been skeptical of cool pavement because of the added light burden from reflected light. Have you been able to detect that effect, and what is it?
Great question. So we have the study we've done, and I think it's been consistent. So it did multiple types of cool pavement. Some are physical and they show up as like white, and you could tell it's reflecting. Those have been found to have neighboring buildings increase their air conditioning, for example, because of that reflection. The kind that the city is using is called ARA-TI+. It's a chemical response to sun, and it goes on with the rejuvenator, and we've found no negligible difference. So it was like tiny but significant but tiny in a way that a fraction of a degree in a before and after study, which in a before and after study, I think you could call that negligible. And similarly, our colleagues in Phoenix have tested similar applications of the rejuvenator and found some similar issue. It might be that the pavement has longer longevity. That's what lab studies suggest. But what we're not seeing in that type of pavement rejuvenator is a noticeable difference for like a pedestrian or a cyclist. And
so not effective in those instances.
it depends on what your goal is. So if your goal is longevity of pavement, which is why the transportation, I mean, that's one reason, right? Then it might be worth it, and we'll just have to wait and see if it extends the lifespan of the pavement. But if your goal is to reduce urban heat island effect, I think it's more complicated than that, and I'm not seeing evidence outside of lab studies that suggests that it's working the way that we think it might. But there are different forms of those technologies, and there are new ones coming out all the time, so that can definitely change.
And those rejuvenators are not PFAS.
I don't know.
Just wondering.
I don't know, the one, the ARA+, I think has nanoparticles, and it does some chemical reaction that takes nitrous out of the air. So supposedly it helps, but I think the bigger challenge for a lot of them is that they can only be applied in certain conditions on certain streets. And all of the studies and evidence is pretty lab based. And so once you get it in the real world and you add rain to it, what the impacts are, I don't know.
And you're correct, so study came out recently that shows that the effect of trees and temperature reduction in arid climates is much more than in temperate climates. Yeah. And just to also note, Tom Dang back there, he is also on this technical advisory group.
Well, thank you, everybody.
Okay. There's some baggies if you want to take anything, you know, scones or tamales, help yourself, or brownies, there's lots of brownies left, but I got them.
Anyway, I'll email you. I don't want to repeat some of those, yes, Texas. Well, I'll email you tomorrow. We're also putting on a. But I've been asking them to do consultations as well. But
I love the classes that we have. It's not cheap, yeah.
Yeah.